Hello, everybody, and welcome back to your second episode of the week of Church is Stupid.
Comma butt.
I'm Andy.
I'm Ruth.
I'm Elijah.
So we started this conversation out earlier this week about Lent and about... Yeah, you're good to remind me to start my timer there on accident.
I did, but I started mine, so it's okay.
Well, now mine's off. Okay. But we started our conversation about Lent and about some of our Lenten traditions and about this reflection of the personal and the community that's gotten lost in a lot of our traditional traditions. Like, we have lost this community aspect and like reflection. And I'm kind of curious what you guys think about that. Do you think that like there's a way that we get that back, or do you think that religion has become more of a personal thing?
So 100%, let me clarify that that's only true of the church in the West. That is not true of the church universal. Because we obviously come from a very ADistinct point of view. Mm-hmm. You know, we live in the United States, and therefore that's the perspective. Mm-hmm. And all of us have been raised in Protestant denominations. Yeah. And so we come with our own distinct view. But I think, truthfully, the way that we get, and I do think it is a loss. I think individualistic society, as we're seeing it play out, is proving to be isolating. And we're realizing more and more how much we do need other people. I think that the best way to move forward is to actually start to embrace other people's opinions and beliefs and cultures and really starting to... we have to stop looking at ourselves as the end-all be-all and start realizing that everybody has something to offer. And that's where... That's where I think we could learn. I've been, obviously, I'm a pastor in the United Methodist Church, and some of you guys might know this. I am actually not ordained yet. I am commissioned, mm-hmm. which means that I am in the process, essentially, and hopefully I'll go for my ordination interviews this year, actually. Woo!
Best of luck.
We could
Thank you.
Do a quick rewind back to the Christianese episode.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of...
Because I still barely understand the difference between the two. I had to ask you.
Previously on Church is Stupid, comma but.
I don't think we actually talked about it, so it's a brand new everything.
Oh, is it? I thought we did a little bit.
I'm just talking about the subject matter, because
like
a lot of people will hear ordained and commissioned and go, what? Like me.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's...
Well, you see, I hear commission, and I think Commissioner Gordon, but that's...
Yeah, so moving on.
Now we're on a totally different topic. But yeah, anyhow, where was I going with all of this? Oh, one of the things that I really, really, really wish was a part of the process was having us do an intentional, at least year-long placement in another country. And not as like you're the head pastor in another country, but as you are a learning pastor mm-hmm. in another country. So you're not there to teach really as much as you are to learn. And I think that we could really learn about how to integrate more communal aspects in that way. And so there are things like, for a while I considered not even becoming a pastor until I had an experience being a part of a church in another country. That did not, unfortunately, pan out the way that I had hoped it would. But I don't know that we can ever, or I don't know that it's fair to say we could never, but I think it would be very helpful for us to start looking outside of our own culture and stop thinking of our culture as being this almost, whether or not it's spoken, superior. Because we're not.
I really like how you worded that, your idea of going like cross-cultural with the intention to learn and listen, and not going there to teach all these other inferior cultures, mm-hmm. All just the benefits or the reasons why they should be like us. Because I do think, kind of like you said, regardless of if we consciously think that way or not, or we say it or not, there is that sort of just inherent view, I think, in a lot of Western culture in general, and especially in Western church.
Well, and part of that's the merging of nationalism with Christianity.
Right.
That has really promoted and furthered that idea.
Yeah. Because there's definitely... there is a lot that we could learn from just experiencing other cultures, and especially Christianity in other cultures, and how different it looks compared to the way that we do it in the West, like you said.
Well, and there's a phrase. You don't have to always reinvent the wheel. So why not go learn from people who do know how to do communal church?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I feel like it's easier than trying to start from scratch, personally. But maybe that's just my opinion. So
well, I brought up this example on last week's episode of the Islamic Church and like the state of the Muslim community and how amazingly self-supportive it is. Mm-hmm. Like they have throughout their day, they have set periods of prayer that you go to the church or that you pray these prayers alone if you're not able to. And I like the only reason that I know this kind of stuff is because like I took a class on it, and like so I completely don't know everything about it, kind of thing. But like you, even when it's not like a special period of the year, you come to the community and you pray daily, and it's a good like reminder of faith, and it's a good like constant of faith and like bringing it back up in your life. But it also helps to build the Islamic community with different like during your life you're expected to make a hajj to Mecca, and which we could do an entire episode about and talk about like that kind of a thing, but I'd like to have an expert here who's not me.
That's fair.
Or yourself. But like there are these amazing faith community building things that like people outside of the Christian, the Protestant, the Catholic, the Orthodox Church, like that, it's not seen done. And even in like non-denominational churches, faith has become this personal reflection of my relationship with God instead of the world's relationship with God. Like that entire
in the West. Continue. I'm sorry. Continue.
Well, you say the West, and I get that, but also, no offense, Australia, Europe, like you have in Africa, the Middle East, India, China, like they all have these more driven communities, and that is honestly thankful to Islam and like that kind of a thing. And I'm saying that out of the reflection of my class and like what it actually had taught me, like in the actual establishment of Islam, like it built these faith communities in like different regions that Islam eventually would like die out or like not hold its strength in that community. But because Islam was a building block of like faith, then these communities remained in that strength and that like self-abiding, like we come together and we pray, we could like this kind of a thing. And so like having a different building block rather than us who were building off of Judaism in a way for our like relationship, and that it becomes this almost once a week ceremonial ritual that like you partake in. I may be wrong.
I'd have to fight you pretty hard on that one. But
I'd probably argue it'd be more of the Holy Roman Empire is where we draw a lot more of our history from tradition, right?
I would say the communal aspect comes because there's a huge community aspect in Judaism. Huge community, and early church, huge community aspect. I mean, look at the way
but it's
the faith
lost. That's
it's
my
lost
point.
now. Yeah.
It hasn't had its same effects, and I'm not blaming Islam or like that kind of a thing for it. But in this like technology advancements that we've had, we've lost our community.
If we're going to talk about the building blocks, though, if you even could say like sort of the way the building blocks that for this specific subject, like America, we can say the building blocks that, in terms of our faith and community aspect that we were built on, we could probably relate that a lot more, trace that back more to like I said, like in history, probably the Holy Roman Empire and that style of Catholicism being in Europe, and then like the Protestant movement out of that, probably more than like direct, because I think that idea of communal like the communal aspects of older ancient Judaism was probably lost a long time ago compared to our very, very recent history here in the West, you know.
Well, that's just why I wanted to argue the point strictly for, I don't think the building blocks because essentially the building blocks of both of Islam, Judaism, and of Christianity are the same, because they're all Abrahamic faiths. Mm-hmm. So they all come from Abraham, literally. Ishmael for
but they focus on different things. Like
but
each one focused on different things.
But the true foundation of Christianity is communal. That would be my argument. So the building blocks that's not that they are, but they should be, and scripturally they are.
It's like that pyramid thing that like different things get chopped off as you move up the pyramid.
Sorry, that was
in one direction. One became like your centralized pillar of like the room, and then in others it's like, oh, we do this, we do like.
That was the only reason I had to fight. It was just because
you're perfectly fine.
Because the nature of Christianity itself is not that. The nature of Christianity is community driven. It's not individually driven. But the nature, as it is now, of the church is a different.
Let's segue that. Let's segue what you just said. How the nature of original or true Christianity is communal. And segue that into how that relates to Lent now. Because I think all of what we've been saying branched off of us talking about the idea of Lent, kind of mixing or maybe even clashing in some ways with our sort of Western societal ideal of individualism, right? Mm-hmm. So how could... if I'm trying to form a question, how could that almost, sorry for him and Mike, that original communal form or idea of a season like Lent in the church look now? How does it look now, maybe even in some specific places, compared to, I think, what we often see it, the way we often view it as almost like a holiday that, you know, some people do and some people don't. As a church, are there any examples you can think of or ideas of how maybe we could start to, whether it's changing narrative or just encouraging ideas of viewing the purpose and the idea of Lent as a more communal aspect of the church? I mean, maybe that goes beyond just Lent, and maybe that actually goes beyond that and into transforming the idea of how we view church entirely. But if we can segue that into that, is all I'm trying to kind of do right now.
No, I understand.
Difficult everything.
It honestly would be a complete transformation, if you want me to be real.
Yeah.
Because I mean, step one maybe is realizing that the pastors are not the only people who are supposed to be doing spiritual transformation.
I am so sorry.
Just had to hit everything.
I really did just jolt the entire table. I am so sorry.
That idea that pastors or staff people are not the only ones who are supposed to be participating in the community of life.
No, that's a fair point, though.
Because I think that there's a large... So if Christians don't know something, it almost always comes down to, well, my pastor never taught me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, yes, I do think that a pastor takes on a great responsibility in becoming a pastor. But when did our faith become that?
About the pastor?
Yeah, essentially is what I'm
on the
saying.
Pastor.
And so if you happen to go to a church where the pastor teaches about Lent, you'll hear about it. And if you don't, you won't. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough.
There's not, I mean, and again, I was very blessed to have parents who really encouraged me and pushed me to learn and embrace and have my own faith. but I think that's one of the starters, is to stop seeing, and part of that is also stop seeing it as a Sunday morning experience. As Andy said, we could
go
learn,
like hand in hand, right?
Yeah, as Andy said, we could learn a lot from our Islamic brothers and sisters about really building that community. And I think the other, there's a lot that I think
it is a
comes
really,
to that,
really loaded question for sure.
Because to have a communal experience, you can't fake that. You know what I mean? I mean, there is some discipline aspects to it, but realistically, it needs to be authentic by nature. And you can't, especially, and I hate to dog on Methodism, but we really like to have shock methods, like 1 + 1 = 2, and then we regurgitate the method over to all of our churches. And shockingly, it doesn't work. Is that not fair? Are you laughing because it's true?
I'm laughing because you used 1 + 1 = 2 for shock. Sorry. 1 + 1 = 2 is not shocking. That's a given in life. It's like you take 1 apple plus 1 apple, you have 2 apples.
I know. What I am saying, though, is that same logic does not apply to church.
No, yeah. One person plus one person does not a community make. Well, okay.
If they
come on.
No, we're going down the semantic rabbit hole.
If they strive and try, then yes, they can make a community. But
is there... Okay. Center ourselves.
You okay?
Is there, regardless if it's like the best case scenario or not, is there a kind of middle ground maybe? Maybe not even middle ground as much as there is, I don't know. Is there some kind of compromise, or maybe just looking at the reality of how things change, or rather how they don't change, of helping those within the church, and let's just keep saying, like the church in the West, start to view church, or maybe specific things in church like Lent, as a more communal sort of idea, while still not trying to throw individualism out all entirely. Because I don't know, I'm trying with what we talked about with Lent so far. Both of these aspects sounds really, really beautiful to me. On one aspect, the idea, like you were saying, of a church as a community coming together and, grabbing arms with each other and entering a season of sacrifice to help themselves as a community grow spiritually. That is an amazing and beautiful thing, and I think that I agree with you in a lot of ways, where I think that is the idea of what church is or should be, is that idea of a community being together and helping one another, but also as a family grow. Mm-hmm. But I also see a lot of appeal and a lot of beauty in this idea of, if Lent, the idea of Lent and the idea of fasting, were to be sort of shared and taught correctly, I also really love the idea of encouraging people to look within themselves personally and individually for the areas in their own life where they need to grow personally, and encouraging people to, maybe, whether it's directly fast or not, encouraging people to, let's just say, fast on their own to help themselves grow in areas that only they and God basically can identify, to help themselves grow. I'm not sure if that tracked as well as I wanted it to, but I feel like I'm seeing two sides of the same coin in a way, where I'm seeing this idea of personal growth, and how the idea, maybe not Lent specifically, because like we're saying, the history of Lent does revolve more around the communal church aspect, but in the idea of fasting, in that idea of personal sacrifice and of something and replacing it with intention to grow spiritually, I see like the beauty in encouraging that for everyone in their personal lives, and having people realize and look within themselves and see the areas where they need to grow or where they want to grow, as well as the beauty in as a community coming together and doing it together to help each other. So is there some sort of, does it all boil down to us having to just abandon the individualism entirely in society or in our church? Or can there be that idea of both of, like, I don't know, is there a middle ground between the two? I guess is what I'm trying to say. This communal aspect and this individualism that we have in our society.
See, I think what we've been, like, what the church is currently pushing for is that middle ground. Because I think that you have the far end of either spectrum.
Yeah.
Which is the self-reflective, like the singularity, like I don't go to church. I am my own personal, like, religious teacher. I teach myself kind of thing. Like
the religious nuns.
The religious, like, self-reflective, like that person. Okay. And then you have the opposite end, which is a community that just like perfectly strives together, does everything together, a cult.
You sacrifice the one for the sake of the many.
Yeah, kind of thing. It's kind of that mentality. But I think, like, the goal of what the current is for that middle ground, or it has been. And it's like encouraging the outside self-reflective, but trying to come together for the communal reflective. But I think that we're doing it poorly.
I think I can see like, see what you're saying.
So, like, the week strives for this self-reflective, like, time period where you have your own time where you can reflect on, like, either the teachings of the weeks that you get from your Sunday whatever, or your Wednesday Bible study, or your, like, that kind of thing. And it strives for this self, like, reflective time. But nobody, and I'll say nobody, there are probably definitely people who do this, but, like, nobody takes that time for the self-reflective, like, aspect. And so it gets kind of lost a little bit. Or you come to church on Sunday, and if the message isn't perfectly for, like, what you need in your own self-reflective, then you don't participate as much in the community kind of thing. And so we have these individuals who act as individuals, and then we have a community that acts as a community. And we're trying to, like, just slam the two together when they aren't a perfect fit, or when, like, our ideas for one aren't a fit for the other thing. Does that make sense? Am I saying things that are confusing everything more?
No, I see what you're saying. I'm trying to, like, define everything you're saying, or apply it in literal terms. And I think we like to, we both, including definitely myself, we talk in, like, these ideas, and then I'll get to the point where I try to visualize it in, like, in real examples, and then I have a tough time drawing examples of it. But, like, the ideas of what you're saying sound very familiar, because, like, and I think I get what you're saying.
I guess, like what my point is, like, we're trying to encourage community, and we're also trying to encourage, like, self-reflective, like, that's what the goal of everything is. But
when you're saying that we're trying, forgive me if I'm totally treading and saying it wrong, but do you mean basically that we should be trying, or that as a church, like, we're definitely actually pushing for it?
I think as a church, we think we're definitely pushing for it. I think we're failing.
Okay.
And I think, like, the church has been, like, failing, because you see people who are, like, Sunday churchgoers, who you go to church on your Sunday, and I guarantee I have been a part of this, like, crowd, and at times I still feel a part of it. But it's this, like, the church encourages me to have a personal relationship with God, but I have no idea how to do that. Or, like, I'm encouraged to join, like, the community, but the church doesn't give me any way to join the community throughout the week. Yeah. And so everything falls to, like, the individual to set up like their own community, like, things. And so, like, you end up having to, like, set up your own Bible study, or, like, like this kind of a thing, or, like, you develop a Bible study community and you create your own community within the Bible study of, like, these great Christians, but then somebody else comes along and they want to join into your community and they just don't fit. And so, like, the community doesn't change, but the person doesn't get included, and so the person gets lost. And
so examples, those are all just saying, those are examples of maybe us trying or just being a part of that and not doing the best that we could, almost, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I may be explaining things very poorly, for,
because it sounds like to me you're talking a lot about almost personal, not like entirely 100% personal experience, but like I see like it seems a little bit like you're drawing like from those examples and then like saying like these are some examples of individuals acting as or being individuals and acknowledging it while also trying to act as a community and doing well on some fronts and doing poorly on other fronts.
And I also
think that is a pretty good explanation of of church right now as it is in general,
And so I think like what I'm trying to say is that we've been trying for that middle ground, like trying for the best of
ideally,
the self-reflective and the community basis, but we just haven't been there or like ever been there. Like we took a switch and we were like, all right, I'm trying to put it in the middle so the lights only half come on. And in trying to do so, like we're using a normal analog switch, it only goes up and down. So you get like switches in between. And so you go from one community where the switch is fully in the community basis and people aren't taking that and like self-reflecting as much or like they're living fully in the community and losing some of that self-image kind of thing. But then you flip it the other direction and there's none of this self-reflective there's all of this self-reflective, I apologize, and none of this
church
community.
Is for me and only me,
yeah.
And like this church is about me because of it, without saying it like that.
And so you go to like your Sunday morning and you're like, well,
if I don't feel like it's for me, then the church is doing it wrong, sort of an idea. Yeah. Ruth, what are you thinking of? Because I know, again, loaded question that I think leads into spitballing and more than it leads into actual answers, but that's kind of what I expected.
And I guess because in my own head they must exist at the same time, that it's not a question for me. Because Christ died for you, but Christ died for all. So that's always been a paradigm that we've held. I mean, that's something that, I mean, that's essential to church doctrine is that Christ died for you, but Christ also died for all. So therefore, essentially it breaks down to, if you were the only person on earth, Christ would have still done it. But that's true of every single person you could ever meet. Like if they were the only, and so it's this individual faith, but it's also this communal faith. And so I guess your question really more confused me, because I must have been explaining poorly, because to me those have to exist, and I think a true community doesn't fight individualism, but it encourages and acknowledges and lifts up individualism, because each part, but that's not how it's played out all the time. That's not how it's played out. But in my perfect utopian community that could ever exist, everyone is encouraged for what makes them themselves and different. And everyone has that relationship with God on that personal level and also on that communal level.
Difference between conformity and coming together as individuals, right?
Oh yeah. And I absolutely agree with Andy. We call it, if you study ministry, you usually call it the pendulum, that I know I've said 1.5 million times. But you're exactly right. It's just like a light switch. It's one way or the other. And there's no in between. What we really need to do is get rid of the switch and get a dimmer switch. For Pete's
we need
sake.
A dial.
We just need to get rid of.
We need a dial and some tape.
But that's really, we keep putting Band-Aids on problems instead of realizing that it's a transformative experience. I know.
I love the Band-Aid example, because it's like, oh, I'm going to put a Band-Aid over my issue. Well, that heals it. What does it mean to put a Band-Aid over? Like, you solve the problem by putting a Band-Aid over it. But it's not. It's more like putting duct tape over the issue, because eventually you have to remove the duct tape, which removes the scab or like whatever. Sorry.
Well, and it's true. And I think
sweeping something under the rug is probably the best.
Yeah. That's way better than a Band-Aid.
Literally just diving into rabbit holes now with no time left.
But I find it, I find that especially Easter can be one of those times where we're really able to come together on both sides of that. Which is why it's such a beautiful, I like to talk about how, to me, Easter, I mean, that's what happened on Easter, what happened during Holy Week. That is the center of our faith. Without that, like, our faith literally hinges on this story. If you don't believe this happened, you aren't a Christian. I mean, that's the cornerstone. And it's in that cornerstone to acknowledge again that Christ died for you, but Christ died for all. I mean, that's the perfect starting place. If we would just be willing to peel back the extras and look at the core once in a while, then maybe if we started looking there and starting there and working our way out, instead of looking at the layers and then trying to dig our way to the core, we might do a little better. And I think that's what tends to happen in a lot of things.
Okay.
And so that's,
So maybe sort of to wrap things up, maybe if we're finishing up our talk about Lent, which is definitely what this was about for more than anything else, maybe instead of just overcomplicating all the questions, maybe like I sort of did, if you're learning about Lent and you're thinking about fasting, whether for Lent or in general, and that idea of giving up something for spiritual transformation, maybe the best way to do it is to approach it from that mindset, like you were just saying, remembering that the whole purpose of doing it is sacrificing something to make more time to grow in your faith, and to grow in your relationship with God, and do that with the mindset and acknowledging that Christ, the reason you do it is because Christ died for you and Christ died for all of us, for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe we should just learn as a church to make that the center of everything, and Lent is no exception to that.
Amen.
There we go.
Amen.
So we are coming to the end of our time, but I need to give a couple of reminders and announcements. We will not be back next week, but we will be back the week after. We're taking a little bit of a week off, mostly just because we record on Mondays, and next Monday we have the day off. And after this Easter season, it's kind of been a little bit taxing on, I know, myself and Ruth. And I don't know, Elijah, have you been taxed by Ruth taxing you?
Ruth
Probably.
really does all of our taxes for the most part. Okay. So
I love doing taxes. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, Ruth loves doing taxes, by the way. She's crazy.
Yeah, so we will not be back this upcoming week, the first week of April, but we will be back the week after that. So episodes coming back on the 13th of April. Any other things that you guys have to add?
Yes, but do not mourn, listeners, because coming up in the near future, we have The Church is Stupid, but Bible study. Yay!
Yeah.
And so you're not going to miss us for long, because starting not next week, but the week after, we're going to be releasing supplementary Bible study episodes. And so what those are is they will go alongside each one of our, each basically week of episodes, and discuss what are the biblical reasons why we chose the topics we chose. And I've been working on that for a couple months now, thanks to the suggestion of Bailey, since last time I said a listener, and then he said, you didn't really mention my name, so I thought I'd mention his name.
Considering as involved he is with this, I
it's
think
true.
it's okay to add his name.
He deserves the shout out. And I thought it was a great idea. And so that will be coming out. The very first one will be that Friday, which
16th.
is Friday the 16th. Thank you very much. At 5 o'clock. And it's about 15 minutes long. But hey, you just get me. Sorry. Aww.
Yay.
Oh. But anyhow, so if that's something you're interested in, or if you live in the Midland area and would be interested in joining a Zoom Bible study, then that option is also available, and that will be Mondays at 7 o'clock. I had to think about what time it was, for half an hour. And yeah, we'll be discussing some of the questions, whereas the podcast will be more of me talking and you listening. You're welcome.
All right. And with all of that information thrown at you guys, we are very over time.
It's true.
So for all of us here at Church is Stupid,
But
I'm Andy.
I'm Ruth.
I'm Elijah.
And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your week.